Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had an enjoyable Yom Tov.
Still working off the effect.
Working off the effect, okay. It's good coffee, yes. Parshas Nasso is the longest parsha in the Torah. And we actually, on page 748, in most years, in most places, it is the parsha you read right after Shavuot. This is not in Israel, And some people see it as some kind of sign that we want to show a commitment after the inspiration that we acquired during Shavuot, that we turn to a text with many, many verses, and we sit that extra few minutes tuning into the Parshat Shavuot. Okay? Now, when it comes to insights of the Torah, people turn to Torah, and they hear insights. In Yiddish, they call it the Vertlach. It comes from the word words, or words. They heard words of Torah. So there are all kind of different styles of what you are going to be hearing when it comes to insights into Torah. It would depend on the teacher. It would depend on his mood, right? There are times that there are sometimes insights given by some that others don't appreciate, and vice versa. You'll hear a Hasidic insight that has at times nothing to do with the basic reading of the text, but nevertheless can be quite inspirational. At times you're going to have an insight that relates very much with the pshat, with the simple reading of the text, and not take into consideration the rabbinic reading it all. Then you have others who do focus on the rabbinic reading. So what we're going to focus on today in this week, this long parsha, are 3 divrei Torah with different styles. 3 divrei Torah. Okay, one is a Torah insight that relates to the idea that the author of this text is actually supernatural, beyond nature, beyond history, and therefore, when it comes to future events, you could actually find references and hints to those events that did not occur yet 3,400 years ago. You could find some kind of remez in the Torah. Okay, that's one approach. We talked about this in the past, but we're going to revisit that, how you could find something in this portion that relates to the author talking about future periods. Obviously, you have the ability after the events to look back and say, yeah, in the Torah it seemed to indicate that. And you obviously ask yourself the question, do you do this for the individual? Do you do this to the nation? But nevertheless, that will be one insight we're going to be talking about. Then, Torah also teaches us how to create a society, right? And what is considered a good virtue for building societies, building communities, and what creates problems. What kind of attitudes create problems in a community? And unfortunately, if you have people that really live their whole life as such problems, why they simply have no place in a community? So Torah is talking about community building, right? Country building, society building. So that's going to be Dvar Torah number 2. Now, Dvar Torah number 3 will relate to the idea that we as humans struggle. We struggle with issues. If you have never ever struggled with any issue in life, right? Please, come to me afterwards and tell me what's your secret, or you could fly over with your wings because you most probably are an angel. But we struggle. we struggle with questions of balancing time. We struggle with issues of having ups and downs, right? We have dark days, very, very dark days, and we have days that we are very happy. Sometimes we go through dark periods alone, where no one else knows, because these are issues that you perhaps don't feel that you could open up to others, and you have this loneliness and this eicha yoshva badad, like eicha, how is it, but you're sitting alone, and you have to act as if nothing happened and smile, and so you have to fool the world around you. There's dark periods we go through, so we have these ups and downs, and hopefully we could turn to this text to guide us, to assist us, to pull through, and to get through them. So that's going to be Dvar Torah number 3 from this week's portion that deals with struggle, a specific struggle of existence, and the solution, or perhaps some kind of advice presented by the text. And that's what we're going to do with this very long Parashat Nasso. Now, what does appear in Parashat Nasso? So briefly, you start page 748. You have to remember that the previous portion gave a census of all the people of Israel, not the Levites. The Levites are different. While the other tribes, we were given numbers. We were actually told that they have their own flags. The Levites don't have their own flag because their identity is there for the sake of others. But the Levites have a role. And what occurred, if you turn back to page 744, Moshe and Aharon were told that, you know what, take a census of the Levites as well. The Levites have 3 families, since Levi had 3 children. So go ahead and number 1, was the beginning of chapter 4, which we read this previous Shabbat. Naso et rosh bnei Kehat. Go ahead, take a census for the sons of Kehat among the Levites. And they have a very unique role. They have a unique role to deal with the holy vessels. The portion ends, last week's portion on page 746, with an awareness that since these Kehatim are dealing with the holy vessels and they should not be seen by the masses, they have to be sure that they are concealed before they are taken, concealing the holy vessels. And now, this week's portion moves on to family number 2. And it tells us, go ahead and take a census for family number 2 of the Levites, the family Bnei Gershon. Fine. And then, the next section on page 748 is, you should know, go ahead and take a census for the children of the family of Merari. Okay? 3 families. The portion continues on page 750. Is there another chair there? Or is there Alan? The portion continues with the setting up of a camp. We know exactly where every tribe is supposed to settle in the camp. But then we are told on page 750 towards the end that we have to send away specific individuals from specific sections of the camp. The Tsarua, the Zav, and Tamel HaNefesh. Okay, 3 are shipped out. Tsarua, someone that has Tsarat. Zav, the person that has some kind of a mission that makes him impure. It relates to some kind of sexual impurity. That's what it symbolizes. And the third that needs to be shipped out is the Tamel HaNefesh, the person who became spiritually contaminated by a human corpse. Rabbis point out, do not read this verse as all 3 being sent away to the same location, but rather the camp was like rings. The inner ring was where you had the Mishkan, the tabernacle. When the person is impure, Tamel HaNefesh, came in contact with the corpse, you cannot enter to the section designated for the tabernacle. That's why today we don't have the ability, we don't have the tools to purge the impurity that comes about due to contact with the dead body, which it doesn't mean you have to touch, even if you're under the same roof. And therefore, there are sections on the Temple Mount, for example, that we don't enter due to the fact that we carry that impurity and we cannot remove it. Okay? I say sections on the Temple Mount because there's obviously going to be a debate. We're Jews, we have to have different opinions. And there are those who say only specific sections, and they can identify those sections. And then there are those that say, oh no, we can't identify with confidence what sections, and therefore you avoid all of the Temple Mount. And therefore you always will hear that debate if you have ever made a tour to Israel, and there's that question, yes to go up to the Temple Mount, not to go up to the Temple Mount. There are those who are going to tell you it's a big Avera, the next person's going to tell you it's a big mitzvah, right? Very confusing to be Jewish and religious in Israel, but it all originates from this idea. So the Tameh Nefesh, the individual who came in contact with the corpse, is going to be avoiding the inner ring. The person, on the other hand, who has this Zav impurity, the sexual impurity, is going to avoid the outer ring, not the complete outer ring, but the section of the Levites. He is not going to be where the Levites are. And then the person who is a tsara'a, the leprosy, the spiritual leprosy, that comes about due to the fact, according to our tradition, that you have a lack of sensitivity to the importance of community. And when you see a flaw by someone, you talk about it to everyone you can. And you are basically corrupting and destroying a community. So guess where you belong? Outside of the community. And that's what we are told here. So that is section number 2 of the portion. The portion continues talking about, some sexual deviations with this portion of Sotah. It talks about the Nezirah, the Nazir. And then on page 762, the Birkat Kohanim, which we're going to get to. That's going to be the third section of our discussion. But at least you know that we have the Birkat Kohanim. And then finally, you have the offerings of the tribal leaders for the first days of the inauguration of the tabernacle. And these seem to be, on the surface, gifts that are not original. But even though they're not original, they came with a desire to give, and therefore they are all honored by the text spelling out the gifts for all 12 leaders, even though they are precisely the same. And for a Baal Koreh, even though this is a very long portion, and you would imagine it's difficult to memorize the whole portion, or for the bar mitzvah boy who has to deal with the Parashat Nasso bar mitzvah and decides to read the whole portion, the nice thing is that when it comes to the last third of the portion, basically we're dealing with 8 verses that repeat themselves over and over and over again, because these are gifts brought by individuals, 12 individuals, but they're all important. I remember once being in Milwaukee by Rabbi Twersky, and it was the Shabbos before his daughter's wedding, and he gave his Dvar Torah basically was that for a successful marriage, you have to find meaning in doing the exact same thing day in, day out. And that's what he was trying to bring out from this section. The Torah is telling you do the exact same thing. But sometimes you have to have the ability and the tools and the mindfulness of finding meaning. But that's what this parsha is about. But I want to go ahead and share with you the 3 insights that we could take from this portion. Insight number 1. So back to page 748. First one's from my father. Father says the following. You should know that when you look at this incredible experience our nation went through, right? Receiving the Torah. And then the Jewish journey has to be broken up into periods. No question about it, right? It is so important to remember, especially for leadership, that guidance from a period of 100 years ago cannot be the guidance for today. When times change, the educator has to be in tune with the times. The educator has to know the challenges of the times and adjust based on that. Right? It's important for the rabbi, it's important for the educator. And as a result of that, there's this danger when we become too conservative, when we have to do things exactly the way they were done in the old country. Because if we don't adapt, right, you don't survive. That's what you have to do. And therefore for example, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the great Khatam Sofer, who lived 180 years ago. And I read what the Khatam Sofer warned his disciples, that they should never ever give a drasha in the vernacular. Meaning a drasha must be in Yiddish. If it's not in Yiddish, better not to give it. Nevertheless, I feel no guilt every Shabbos when I get up and don't give a drasha in Yiddish. Why don't I feel guilty if I respect the Khatam Sofer, right? Why don't I get up there and at least start with some Yiddish, something? Like, why? There's an understanding that the times change, you have to adjust. He made his statement because he sensed that during that period of time, it was an indication that you are members of the reform movement in Hungary. They called it the neologues, they called them, right? So he sensed that for that time, Yiddish is what protects them to retain their identity. No longer today. And then there actually were rabbis throughout our history that had a great amount of sensitivity that when times change, you can't just take a psak from 100 years ago. One of the most significant players in Jewish history, and especially in Jews in Eastern Europe, was a Rabbi Yaakov Polak. We talked about him in the past. Rabbi Yaakov Polak. Rabbi Yaakov Polak, middle of the 15th century. Guess where he was born? Okay, now he was born in Poland. And he grew up in a community that did not have great yeshivot, because Poland at that time, in 1450, did not have such institutions. So he went to Germany, because in Germany they had, at that time, the great yeshivot. So there was some kind of issue there that developed, and he had to leave. He went back to Poland. But due to the fact that he was a charismatic leader, even though he was in his 30s at the time, many of the great students followed him back to Krakow, back to southern Poland. And as a result of that, Poland started developing their yeshivot. That within 60 years, that became really the center of Torah. Where when you talk about Ramosha Israel, it's the Ramah. Many of you probably had the opportunity of, or some people, travelers, I think it's on the to-do list when you travel to Krakow, that you visit the Ramah Shul. So he came there, his presence there was due to Rav Yaakov Polak, and he had hundreds of disciples, and many insights in Torah, and many statements of halacha known as psakim. So towards the end of his life, they asked him, Rabbi, why did you not record your teachings? Right? Everyone else has a book with their teachings, their insights, their psakim. Rav Yaakov Polak, where's yours? And his response was, I don't want to do that. Because what happens if in 50 years from now, the times change, and they have to adjust things? They have to be a little bit stricter perhaps, a little bit more lenient perhaps. If they're going to go ahead and know that Pascha, they're going to be very uncomfortable adjusting things. It's the responsibility of the rabbis 50 years from now to go ahead and determine what should be done. Okay? So we move as a nation. There are different times, different realities. And when we look at the big picture of the past 3,400 years, you can really divide it into 3 periods. Number one, a time which we're going to call the First Temple period. The First Temple period did not occur overnight. It's not like we entered into the land of Israel and had a temple. It took 400 and something years. But we reached that pinnacle during the Beit Rishon, First Temple. And even then, as you know very well, very fast, you study Tanakh, we mess things up. But we reached that period during the days of Solomon, where nations gathered and came to Yerushalayim and were inspired by him. Right? Really a messianic era where the Jewish people are fulfilling their role, having an impact on the world. That is period number 1. Period number 2 is the Second Temple period, where we were in the land of Israel. There was a return, but believe it or not, throughout that period, we had to turn to foreign authorities to get a green light to make any decision, right? We first had to deal with the Persian Empire. Then we had to deal with the Greeks. Eventually, you got rid of the Greeks. We ourselves welcomed in the Romans. So we were in Eretz Israel, but in some ways like foreigners in our land. And some are whispering that they feel that in this day and age, in some ways the state of Israel has to go ahead and wonder what will the superpowers say. In other words, when we talked about that on the Chag a little bit, about a priority of the Jewish state should be that a child in Sderot should not be suffering from post-traumatic stress from a Tzeva Adom, right? That should be a priority of a leader. A priority of a leader should be that, and when you hear it, when we visit Sderot and you hear the description presented to us, that in some cases there are little kids that their first words were Tzeva Adom, right? So a leader, that should be the priority of a leader. This should not be taking place. Now, I'm not saying it's not, but the concern we always have is if perhaps acceptance among world leaders is a little bit more important than it should be vis-a-vis the importance of taking care of your people, right? This is a question, but that's obviously a different discussion. Period one is the nations gather and are inspired by the Israelites, and that is represented by the First Temple period. Second Temple period represents the idea that we are in the land of Israel and we are like Gerim. Gerim. We're like foreigners in our own land. And period number 3 is the long and bitter exile. Those are the 3 big periods that you could break Jewish history. And my father argued the following, that perhaps what is presented here as the 3 families, Kahat, Gershon, and Merari, symbolize those periods, because the word Kehat appears somewhere else in the Torah, where we are told that the blessing that Yaakov gives is Veloi Kahet Yamim. In other words, it means gathering. Kehat is gathering. So the first family relates to the idea of nations gathering. As that period came to an end, they concealed the holy vessels, and that is symbolized by the fact that at the end of Parshat Bamidbar, they concealed the holy vessels. Our Parsha begins with period number 2, which is Bnei Gershon. Gershon, Ger, you are a foreigner in your own land. And then the third period, which by the way, the word Nasso, which means elevate. It doesn't appear when the family of Merari is introduced, because we don't feel elevated in the exile. So that is the period of Bnei Merari, Maror, bitterness, the bitterness of the exile. So this is an insight that we will call a reminder, perhaps, that the author of this text is not just looking at that period, but has an awareness of the journey of the people of Israel. So that was Dvar Torah number 1. Okay, I owe you 2 more. Dvar Torah number 2 to the bottom of page 750, when we talked about the 3 areas. The 3 people that are sent out of the rings, right? So, I think we all agree, the Mitzorah has no place in a community. Okay, the cynic, the person that all they know how to do is share negative information about others, right? No place for him in the community. He is shipped out completely. Now, on the other hand, the Zav, the person that symbolizes a sexual impurity, where he has a very strong desire and does not have the complete toolkit to control it, he is a welcome member in the community. We welcome him, right? He's still part of Klal Yisrael. However, don't make him a leader, because when a person is controlled by any desire, it corrupts leadership, right? It could be sexual desires, it could be money, it could be honor, right? Do you know how many fights there has been throughout our history between great rabbinic figures because of something as stupid called kavod? You know what kavod is? In other words, what? They honored him before me, they gave him shlishi, and they gave me revi. He was called under the chuppah Harav HaGaon HaAdir, and I was only called Harav HaGaon. That's unacceptable, right? And then they walk around thinking, I'm going to have to put him down one day to show that I know more than him. And when he gives a psak that I don't agree with, I'm going to go ahead and make it clear that he has no clue what he's talking about. Right? I wish this would be completely theoretical. Right? I wish that this never ever happened. We do have, let's make it clear, many great heroes who had the ability to overcome that. We have such heroes. We have heroes that, despite the fact that they disagreed with someone, you could barely find those disagreements. David handed me a book to go through that talked about the 19th century, and it focused on two rabbinic figures in Yerushalayim in the last decades of the 19th century, very strong leaders. One of them his name was Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, Rabbi Diskin, known as the Rabbi of Brisk, the first Rabbi of Brisk in Israel, but Rabbi Diskin. And the other one was a Rabbi Shmuel Salant. Okay? So they both became the leaders of the old Yishuv in the 1880s, 1890s. And this historian, the historian has a clear agenda of finding something there where they had a fight, right? Something that there was a disagreement. And this poor historian has to write that I really was not able to find anything in public because clearly they had different philosophies, but they were very sensitive to the fact that if they go after one another, it will create a tremendous machlokas. So therefore, even though I tried very, very hard to find something, I had no success. So we do have those great rabbinic heroes that are able to overcome, right? That when they come up after 120, they have a big fat lip because they were biting it throughout their life, right? We have such figures. But then you have situations where there is desire. And when a person gives into desire, you're welcome into the community, but do not place such a person among the Levi'im. What do the Levi'im symbolize? Those who are to guide and inspire others. They cannot be a guide because their drive, what should be the drive of the proper leader? The welfare of the people, right? And if they step on you once in a while, and believe me, they do, it should be something you have to have the maturity to ignore because you're achieving something greater. You're assisting Klal Yisrael. You're leading Torah to the next generation. You are playing a role in the fact that in 100 years from now there's going to be Torah Jews. That is far greater than someone calling you a fool, right? Or the fact that someone says that you don't know what you're talking about. Deal with it, right? You are not going to be among the Levi'im. So that's the idea. The Tsarat person has no place at all within the camp until he makes the proper changes. The person who is the Zav, this emission, this impurity emission of relates to sexual matters and desire, cannot be among the Levim. The Tameh Met, Tameh LaNefesh, he could be a leader, but don't place him in the temple itself. Now what does that symbolize? Right? When you indeed have a strong desire to make your way to some sections of the Temple Mount and you decide not to because you remember that you are tmemet, meaning that you were in contact with a corpse, you went to a funeral, okay, you went to a cemetery. Well, what should you be thinking that moment when you don't enter? So the idea is that Judaism is a religion that values life, right? Don't make us, this is the greatest danger of a faith that believes that there's something beyond life, which we believe in. We believe that there's some kind of consciousness that exists after the passing. That yes, there is something more, and therefore we value our existence because we believe that there's more waiting for us and we could achieve things and there's reward. We believe in these concepts, but there are times that, you know what religion does? It starts telling you, well, because in the afterlife there's some incredible, good, great things waiting for you in Gan Eden, so don't value existence and don't value life, right? Be waiting for death, celebrate death, right? You know, like, you know, the cartoons that they show by them, that the Muslim mothers showing one another, this is Shahid, you know, he's going to be a Shahid, my son, in a few months. And the other one responds, wow, you know, they blow up so fast. In other words, that was the joke that they made about that. There's something wrong with such a culture. That's not, the Jewish culture must be of, there's value in living. Let's do things. Let's create a society. Let's beautify Eretz Yisrael. You know that there's a concept of beautifying Eretz Yisrael. Tiferet Eretz Yisrael. Now, if all of life is only here because we're trying to get to the world to come, why is it important that our streets be nice? Why is it important that there not be garbage all over the community? Obviously, the Torah wants us to value our existence. This is something that a few years ago I had in the office. I shared this story. That was a fellow by the name of Yitzchak Pindrus, who was the deputy mayor of Yerushalayim. And he was here in Toronto. He came, we schmoozed a little bit, a very friendly and bright guy. And I asked him the question I've been waiting to ask. Why is it that in Haredi neighborhoods there's so much garbage everywhere? That was the question I asked him. And he had a good response, actually. He was ready for it. And he said that in the Haredi neighborhoods in Yerushalayim, when they were built originally, they were built for families of 2 or 3 children. The reality is the Haredim Kinai Nahara move in and they have 11, 12 children. The amount of garbage you produce, so there's nowhere, the city planning was not for them. And he says, by the way, in the newer Haredi areas, like Elad, he mentioned a few places where indeed Kiryat Sefer, they build it with an understanding that in that small dira, they're going to have Kinai Nahara 13 people, and the issue does not exist. So I was happy to see that at least it is something that it was something that he's a member of Knesset now, this Pindrus. He got in as number 8 for the United Torah Judaism. He got in as number 8. Odds are he ain't going to be there in the next round, but maybe in the 3rd round there will, who knows. But value life. Don't place death in your temple. You hear the idea? And therefore we are told, you ship out Tamela Nefesh. Don't place him in the temple because the temple has to be life. And Kohanim are people that appreciate and value life. So that's message number 2 of this week's Parsha. But now it's really time to turn to what we want to discuss, and that is Birkat Kohanim. 762, please. Okay? The Kohanim yesterday and the day before gave us a bracha. It is a significant part of our Chag, because if you think about it, the Kohanim, who in the days of the temple were very active in their role, are left only with this Birkat Kohanim in essence. I mean, yes, there are other things that they do, the Pidyon HaBen, there are other things, but I think that when it comes to a Chag, there's an understanding that this is a significant moment. If you have ever had the privilege of being in Yerushalayim during Chol HaMoed, when they have the Birkat Kohanim, where you have hundreds or thousands of Kohanim, and you have tens of thousands of people that come, it is extremely inspiring when you have the Birkat Kohanim. But you obviously want to ask yourself, what on earth is it about? Right? So, turn to page 762. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. This is after, by the way, we establish the camp. The camp is all ready to go. Right? This is like the cutting of the ribbon. Everyone was told where they're supposed to be. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do. Everyone knows who doesn't belong in the camp. And Hashem says, verse 22, Daber el Aaron vel banav le'emor. Tell Aaron and his children, Ko tivarchu et bnei Israel. This is how you bless them. Don't be original, Cohen. Don't come up with your own blessings. Don't add anything. I want these words. Amor lahem. Say to them the following. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. Okay, God should go ahead and bless you and safeguard you. Ya'er Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. May Hashem illuminate, right, His countenance for you and be gracious to you. And then, section 3, God should indeed, Yisa Hashem panav elecha, that His face should be towards you, and He should establish peace. Fine. Now, there's 2 things we have to address here. Number 1, we address our dreams when the Kohanim are blessing us. You know that there are prayers that we turn when the Kohanim are singing. So many people have a tradition that they start asking God for clarity or to deal with their dreams. So for some reason, dreams, we can ask Freud for assistance, but dreams are addressed during Birkat Kohanim. Why? Number two, when the Kohanim give us the bracha, they're fulfilling a mitzvah. When they want to fulfill a mitzvah, they make a bracha. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech olam, asher, take over. So far so good, right? In other words, you sanctified us. V'tzivanu levarech et amo Yisrael. That would be enough. He commanded us, it's all true so far, right? He sanctified the Kohanim, and he commanded us to bless the people of Israel. But then they add one more thing. Last word is? Now show me please in the verse where you were told to do it with love. I have nothing against it. I'm just trying to say that you have to, it needs to, where did that come from? Where did it come from? The ahava. So I once said avort, and this is more on the Hasidic end of things, meaning don't take it as pshat, but it's interesting nevertheless that there's actually a statement, I probably shared it with you, that there's a statement the rabbis make that when you want to know what totafot mean, totafot, which are the tefillin, so the rabbis, you say that, you know what's interesting, the rabbis point out is that in a few African languages, in some of them they use the word tot for two, and in some of them they use fot as two. So if you put together the word totfot, it comes out 4. And tefillin has 4 sections. Okay, nice. So I learned from it that it is acceptable to turn to foreign languages to explain Torah. And maybe those foreign languages have some roots in a language that the Torah was familiar with, perhaps. Now, in the Torah itself, there are only 2 times where the word amor appears. One, when the Hebrew slave is supposed to go free, and he says to the master, Ve'im, what does he say? Ahavti, I love my master, I don't want to leave. And the language the Torah uses in the beginning of Parashat Mishpatim is Im amor yomar ha'eved. Im amor yomar ha'eved. And what does he say? Ahavti, I love. Now, if you took Spanish, amor. What's amor? Love. Im amor yomar ha'eved. It sounds very poetic, romantic, and magnificent. Really, amor yomar ha'eved. Ahavti. That's in Parshat Mishpatim. Where else in the Torah does the word amor appear? Right here, where Ko tevarchu et bnei Yisrael. Amor lehem. Amor with love. Okay, so this is the Dvar Torah. That's the more on. I've shared it, and it is interesting. You got to agree, but please don't publicize it. Amor. That's number 1. Okay. However, what is it really about? What does the amor have to do with anything? So, Rav Hirsch gives a Dvar Torah on a different area of text, and he talks about the vessels in the Holy Ark. And he talks about the fact that when you walk into what's known as the Heichal, this is the covered chamber of the tabernacle and of the temple, you find right smack in the middle the Mizbeach HaZahav, a golden altar. And that symbolizes the significance of the Kohen, because the Kohen performs a service in the golden altar. On one side, to the north, there is a table with bread, a symbol of wealth. Right? And by the way, if you want bread on your table, you got to work. You got to be involved in the physical world. You got to roll up your sleeves. You got to get a career. You got to score good on your SAT or LSAT, and you have to go ahead and apply to schools. That's to get your bread. On the other side of that room, on the south side, there was the menorah, which symbolizes light. What is light? The light of Torah. And the menorah became the symbol of the people of Israel because we are here to illuminate. You cannot illuminate unless you are mindful of spirituality, mindful of the higher being, mindful of your role and detach yourself to some extent from the physical world. If you're always working, right, if 24/7, sometimes think about it. There are people that don't have a Shabbos, and they have phones, cell phones, and there are cases, and I've heard about this about teenagers, that they would wake up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning because they might miss a few of, and you could be dealing here with a person that 24/7, literally, right? Like used to be 7-Eleven, now they're open 24 hours, that around the clock you're just involved with the world. You go mishuga, right? You need to have a time to focus on the light you're producing. But the struggle we have, says Rav Hirsch, is that how do you balance that, right? If you are only involved in work, and here and there you're involved a little bit in spirituality, doing some chesed, studying some Torah, praying a little bit, but it's 5 minutes a day, and then the rest of the time your whole existence is in the workplace. You're not balanced. Now, by the way, if you are only involved in Torah and prayer and not taking care of the needs of your family, it's not going to be long lasting. You gotta, we live in a world, and im en kemach and Torah. You have to balance it. It ain't easy. Who guides us? How do we balance it? You need guidance from someone that appreciates the world and appreciates you and connects to you. He connects to you. He looks into your soul. He looks into your eyes. And his agenda is only your welfare, right? There are times that you go to people for advice. Their agenda is to give this incredible advice, and that you should tell everyone how smart they are because they want to look smart. That's a flawed leader. The good leader is not interested at all in himself, right? But rather his agenda is, I want to see your needs. I want to look into your eyes, and I want to be concerned, right? I love you. I want to connect to you, and I'm going to give you that piece of advice because that is how you're going to live that balanced life with confidence, by the way. Because, there's a concept of aseh lecha rav yistalek min hasafek. When you are guided by someone, and you believe that person told me what to do and that's what I should be doing, you have no doubts. You talk about Hasidim. You know how magnificent it is if you are a real Chassid and you have a Rebbe, and anything you do, you ask your Rebbe, and you never have to doubt yourself, right? It's so magnificent. It is so beautiful. The Rebbe said, I have to go ahead and live in Tanzania. So even though it's difficult, but the Rebbe said, right? They have no doubts, no struggles, right? It would be nice. I wouldn't mind one. Now, obviously my requirements are far greater for the Rebbe because I would have to see that he's actually very smart and very knowledgeable and concerned and not claim that he's supernatural. So I'm still looking for that. And when I find him, I'll make myself a Rebbe. But I haven't found that person yet, right? And it has to be living, in my opinion, as well. So I'm limited. I'm limited, right? But the concept of a person that loves me and is concerned about me and shares with me this idea of balancing your life, that's the Kohen. And if you look now, let's look at these blessings. The first blessing, Yivarechecha v'yishmerecha, that's physical. Be blessed. May your stocks go up, right? May your stocks go up. May your retirement planning work well, right? No surprises, nothing should default. And therefore you need shmirah, right? When you're blessed spiritually, right, you do a mitzvah. It doesn't need any protection because the credit is there, safe. You do communal work, you're kind to people, you study Torah, you pray, you eat cheesecake on Shavuos, you eat flesh, whatever it is, it remains up there as a credit. In the physical world, right? How secure are the banks in Canada, right? I turn on the radio and listen to the challenge with more people here dealing with too much debts. These are things you worry about. Something not too much. You shouldn't, God forbid, right? To diversify, but you still need shmirah. So the first statement relates to our physical needs. The second statement, ya'er, that God should go ahead and illuminate. What is illumination? Spiritual illumination, clarity. So statement number 2 is that God himself should go ahead and illuminate your life, that you should be gracious, all spiritual. The third pasuk relates to the balance. And what word in Judaism means a balance? Where you feel complete. You don't feel pulled in one direction over the other direction. You have internal shalom. You feel in peace, right? That's what we are addressing here. And that's what the Kohen does. The Kohen, the Talmud tells us that when the Kohanim give us the bracha, it has to be panim keneged panim. You have to face them. Okay, now they turn a little bit. It's important if you, let's say, on the Ezras Nashim, that you are behind, you walk behind. You don't want to have a situation of them missing you. The idea is face to face. Why face to face? It symbolizes the idea that they are concerned about you. And they are giving you this blessing from above, that God should bless us, that we should have this balanced life. And they give it to us and they guide us, because afterwards we turn to these leaders and we ask them, tell me, what should I be doing, right? How do I go ahead and work out my schedule? I feel guilty, right? I'm working too much, I'm learning too much. The Kohen is supposed to address it. And the only time a person could really give advice that is good for us is if they care about us. And it has to have ahava. The ahava is a must. Now, you could explain with it, number one, the idea of dreams. What are dreams? So again, we could bring Freud into the picture, and he would tell us about things that we struggle with subconsciously, things that bother us. So sometimes a dream comes about due to the fact that I'm struggling with an issue. So how do you address it? Address not just the dream, but the symptom. Find the Kohen who gives you balance, who loves you. Ahava. And next, it also will explain to us why afterwards we turn to the Kohanim, and what do we say to them? Yashikoach, good job. You know why? Because there's even a statement in the Zohar that if a Kohen gives Birkat Kohanim and he doesn't like the people, it's a bracha levatala. He has to love us. So the Kohen has to go through some exercise beforehand, right? In the congregation. This one just agitated him, right? This one was talking behind his back, and he has to get up there and overcome that all and give the bracha with ahava. The Kohanim deserve a yashikoch. So that's section number 3 of Dvar Torah, of the importance of the balance and the role of the Kohanim in leadership. And hopefully we have something for Parshas Nasso. So thank you for coming today, and have a wonderful day.